Hi there, this is Dr. Anna Maria Helt, herbalist and microbiologist with Basmati.com, here with our herb of the week and with Milo in the background as usual. And so this week we're going to talk about stinging nettle leaf, Urtica dioica. So you may be familiar with stinging nettles from your childhood, depending on where you grew up. They were very common in the woods of Pennsylvania near my home, and they were huge. They towered over us. We called them 7-minute itch because supposedly that's how long they itched when you were unfortunate enough to brush by them, or even worse, fall into them. In my memory, the itch actually lasted a lot more than 7 minutes, and even in my recent memory when I've harvested it. So I actually have stinging nettles growing on my little balcony garden, and so here's a baby leaf growing. And I don't know if you probably can't really see this little stingers on it. Let me get it even closer. Can you see those little hairs? Maybe. So that's what stings you. They're like little hypodermic needles made in part out of silica and containing formic acid and other irritating substances that result in the sting. But despite the bite that this plant has, it's actually wonderful medicine. So this time I'm going to focus on the leaf. And then next time, maybe we'll get into other parts of the plant that are medicinal, so nettle root and nettle seed. But right now, let's talk about the leaf. First of all, it actually is a nutritious and delicious leafy green. Believe it or not, I'm saying you can eat nettle leaf, but what you need to do before eating it is actually cook it. And so two of my favorite recipes that use nettle leaves include pesto and stuffed mushrooms. So you can use it like you would use spinach and stuffed mushrooms. In the stuffed mushrooms case, you just chop them up and the leaves up and cook them however you normally would use your spinach for the stuffed mushrooms. Normally for me that would mean maybe doing a quick saute of the nettle leaves chopped with maybe some onions and garlic. You can stir in a little bit of Parmesan cheese and then stuff the mushrooms that way and bake them. Or you could just chop the nettle leaves and onions and everything up raw, stick them in the mushrooms and cook them that way, but that generates a lot more water in your baking tray. Not a big deal, but just something that I've noticed. And so they're delicious in that recipe, and they taste kind of like spinach on steroids. So you could also use nettle leaf as a substitute or blended with spinach in any kind of sauce or soup or stew that you would normally use spinach in. You would not use nettles raw to eat, right? You don't want to be getting stung in your mouth. It's not going to feel so good. And so the other recipe I like to use nettles for is pesto. Now, often the stuff you stick in pesto is raw, but in the case of nettle leaf, what you'll do is lightly steam them and then blanch them. And that's going to be enough. It's going to be enough to cook them to inactivate their stingers. And then you would use it in your usual pesto recipe. I like to combine my nettle leaf with pine nuts and olive oil, again, Parmesan or Romano cheese, raw garlic, salt, and pepper. And I don't really measure much when I cook. I just find the proportions that work for me. I'm just going to adjust my camera a little bit for better light. There we go. And so maybe that's too much. And so it works great as pesto. Now, nettle leaf isn't aromatic the way that basil and other popular pesto ingredients are. So you could blend in a little basil too if you want that aroma. But I actually love the flavor of nettle leaf pesto by itself. And it's the main reason I actually have a little pot of nettles that I grow on my balcony so that I can use it for nettle pesto. Now, in terms of eating it, nettle is very rich in nutrients. It's going to beat what you buy in the grocery store in terms of greens. And so in terms of minerals, nettle has calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, potassium, iron. Let's see, what else? Look at my chi list. Those are most of the minerals I can think of off the top of my head. It also, the leaf has vitamin C and beta carotene and probably other carotenes as well as vitamin K. That's the other one that you commonly find in leafy greens. And so this particular collection of nutrients means that nettles are a wonderful tonic for our skeleton. And so I would perhaps be drinking nettle tea or eating nettle pesto if I had a broken bone and I wanted to assist my body in its healing. Nettles are also great for connective tissue maintenance, health, and repair. So another great use for them as well. And so a wonderful musculoskeletal tonic. And not only that, not only does Nettles provide healthy nutrients for proper bone and connective tissue and muscle function, Nettles are known to reduce inflammation. And some of the mechanisms by which they do that have been studied. But one study, for instance, found that when people who were using NSAID drugs chronically for arthritis, so NSAIDs are non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, aspirin, Advil, naproxen, things like that. So people that were on those drugs daily for arthritis were able to reduce their dosage of those drugs by about 50% in this study. That was when they were given Nettles. And so that's a good thing, because those NSAID drugs over the long term can increase risk, at least certain of those drugs can increase risk of heart type issues, heart disease, especially when you get into the ibuprofen type drugs. All of those NSAIDs can have a negative impact on the health of the gastrointestinal lining. Some of them are not so great for the liver. And so by being able to reduce their drugs but having the same level of pain relief is a good thing in terms of taking Nettles. So Nettles is great for that, something to consider using when somebody has arthritis. Now, Nettles are also a strong diuretic, and that means they can be useful during something like urinary tract infection to help the body flush out dead white blood cells and dead bacteria. They're not, Nettles are not a standalone herb for UTIs. You need to combine them with something that's going to actually go after the bacteria. But again, they can help flush out the wastes, and that strong diuretic activity can also be useful when there is fluid retention in the body. So they're pretty strong. I once, stupidly, I don't know why I did this. Sometimes I don't know why I do a lot of things, but I was going out cycling and I ran out of my usual green powder that I like to throw in the water bottle. And I was like, oh, hey, look, I've got powdered nettle leaves. Let me throw that in the bottle. Big mistake. I had to stop to pay a visit to the side of the road probably every 15 minutes on that ride. It's a really strong diuretic, so do not put it in your water bottle when you're out and about doing things. And also along the lines of it being a strong diuretic, nettle leaf can be drying with regular use. And so if you're already somebody who tends to be drier, or you live in a really dry climate, it might not be your herb to be using on a regular basis. Now, a great way to use nettle, especially if you're using it as a standalone herb, as a tea, or even a liquid extract. That liquid extract, by the way, is not going to have all the minerals in it, but it's still going to be useful for joint health in terms of inflammation. Anyway, if you're using nettles as a single herb, you really do want to take breaks, whether that's maybe using it every other day, or using it a week on, or a couple of weeks on and then take a week break, or using it during the weekdays and taking a break on the weekend. You want to take breaks. One, because it is very drying, and you will pee a lot, and two, because of largely its silica content. And so silica is a mineral, and silica is not great for the kidneys in the long term. So this is why you don't want to constantly be doing nettle. Now, nettle, when you're blending it with a bunch of other herbs, it becomes a little bit less of an issue. But if you're using it as a single herb, like I said, take breaks. And I think, one more thing before I sign off. Another one of my favorite uses for nettle leaf: allergies. Whether it's seasonal allergies, dog allergies, whatever, nettles have antihistamine activity. They actually reduce histamine secretion by the immune cells in our body that spit out histamine in response to allergens. And I love to use them in formula with other herbs like rose hips that are also antihistamine. But I remember once using them even just by themselves as a cup of tea in my cafe when my dog happened to be there, and somebody came in who had a dog allergy and was getting sniffly, and within about 10 minutes of drinking a nettle tea, she was fine. So nettles can be wonderful support for allergies. Not every herb works for every person's allergies. You do sometimes have to experiment, but give nettles a try. And until next time, be well.